Welcome to the PMA2020 Open Data Kit Form Creation webinar. Introducing your instructors. With us we have Abba and James.
Hi, I'm Abba. I'm a PhD student in the Population, Family, and Reproductive Health Department here at Hopkins.
And I'm James. I'm a programmer analyst with PMA2020.
James and I are actually from the same state, Iowa.
Fun fact.
This training is going to be a chance for you to make an ODK survey as you listen to the webinar. There are 3 objectives of this training. The overall objectives is for participants to create an ODK form from a paper source. More specifically, we will have you translate a paper questionnaire into an electronic ODK format. You'll implement form logic, and finally, you'll convert your survey to XML and add the survey to a phone. So by the end of this training, you'll have made your very own ODK form. So before we continue, I want to make sure that you have downloaded the accompanying lecture materials. You should have a zip file that has a PDF version of this presentation, a Word document that we will be using to translate to XML. You see the title on the slide, and finally, an example of an ODK survey called the PMA2020 Bootcamp Example ODK Form Ebola 2014. We suggest that you take a look at this ODK form to see what ODK looks like in Excel. Finally, we want to make sure you have a phone with ODK Collect installed that is available for use.
So ODK is a great platform that we can use to collect survey data. You might say that Ab and I are ODK nerds.
We are both very, very passionate about ODK.
So ODK presents some great advantages over the traditional questionnaire paper-based methodology. Since ODK is in an electronic format, it is very easy to do at scale. That means we can distribute the forms to many phones very easily, to interviewers or resident enumerators, as we call them in PMA 2020, and it is also very easy to get the information back from the phones and collect them on a server. The data that is collected is also very high quality. Using ODK, we can enforce data entry constraints. For example, if there's a question that has a blank for the interviewer to enter an age, in ODK we can force a number to be written and not allow words to be written, for example. This is something that with paper we cannot do.
As James said, it is easy to compile the answers to the survey when you use ODK. When you use a paper form, you often have to take the paper form and upload it into a software on your computer. However, with ODK, you download the data off the server into what is usually an Excel file, and then you can upload it into Stata very easily or any other statistical software program. So this saves the step of having to do data entry from paper to a computer. Another great aspect of ODK is that skip patterns can be programmed into the survey. That means that the resident enumerator only sees questions that are relevant to the interviewee in front of them. For example, I, as a woman, could be asked questions that James, as a man, would not be asked. So ODK will be programmed to have me respond only to certain questions.
And the last thing that we really like about ODK is that we can take advantage of the phone's features and attach extra information to a survey. For example, the phone usually has a GPS receiver, so we can collect GPS coordinates and attach them to the data that we are collecting. Also, since smartphones often have a camera, we can take photos and attach them to the survey. So now, open up Microsoft Excel and we will begin our first XLS form. XLS form is the name of the syntax that we use to author a questionnaire. We use Excel to name rows and columns in a specific manner so that the ODK platform will understand it. When we save the file, we need to make sure we're using Excel format, or .xls or .xlsx. File names must not have any spaces. They should be written with letters, numbers, and an underscore. So for example, the file name odk space collect space form space 2016 space Nigeria is not a good file name. However, if we were to replace the spaces with underscores, that would work. In our Excel file, let's create 3 tabs and name them Survey, Choices, and Settings. These are the tabs that the ODK platform recognizes. The tabs must be named as you see, lowercase and one word. The order of the tabs does not matter, and it is okay to have extra tabs. When writing an XLS form, keep in mind that only the value of the cells in specially named columns get transferred into the forms on the phone. That means that you can have extra columns, extra rows, highlighting, fonts, and font sizes, and you can keep information in extra tabs in the Excel file as well. This extra styling and extra information can help when editing or making notes to yourself or your colleagues.
So please pause the presentation, save the Excel file with the name example_survey_your last name, and add the 3 tabs as written in the PowerPoint slide. So now that you have your Excel file saved and the tabs added, I want to talk to you about each tab. So the Survey tab is where you'll spend most of your time when writing an ODK Collect survey. This tab has multiple columns where you specify different information about each question that you're asking.
One of the things that we specify in the Survey tab is the form logic. Form logic is how we define how a survey can vary depending on answers that are received. And this is primarily done using skip patterns, which are implemented in ODK as relevant statements, but it also can include calculations, choice filters, and repeating questions.
So on this slide, you can see an example of what an ODK survey looks like in Excel. You can see that each column has a heading in the first row. So for example, in cell A1, you see type written. In cell B1, name is written. That is the heading for the column. Then you can see in cell 2A, where it says begin group, that is the name of a question. Now I want to tell you about the Choices tab. This tab is only used for select one and select multiple questions. We'll give you more detail about those types of questions in a minute, but first we want you to understand the Choices tab is where you will have a list of possible answers that are related to a question in the Survey tab. So here's a screenshot of what your Excel file's Choices tab would look like. You can see that there are 3 columns that are relevant to our work. The first is list name in column A. This is the name of answer options that are grouped together. The list name is the grouping for answer options. So for example, in rows 2 and 3, you see the same list name, yes, no. And you can see that there are 2 options, answer options related to this one list name, yes and no.
The final tab is the Settings tab. This is an optional tab because ODK will set defaults for a questionnaire that does not have a Settings tab. In the Settings tab, we only have 2 rows. The first row is the headings, where we can specify a key, and the second row is where we specify the value for that key. The 3 most common settings that we use are form name, form ID, and default language. There are many other settings that we can put in the Settings tab, but we won't discuss them in this webinar. Here's an example of a PMA2020 Settings tab. There's a form title, a form ID, and a default language.
Great, so the first tab that we're going to work on is the Survey tab. And I think, like me, you'll find this tab is the most complex, since the Choices tab only really lists answer options related to a certain question, and the Settings tab, as James said, only has usually about 2 lines. You'll find that you'll spend most of your time in the Survey tab. We're going to learn column by column what you would include in this tab. The main aspect of this tab is letting ODK know which question type you are asking.
In a paper questionnaire, we often number questions and leave a blank space to write in the answers. In ODK, we have something similar. The rows of a survey tab are questions presented to the user or a value calculated in the background. In a paper questionnaire, we number the questions and have a blank space to write in the answers. In ODK, the rows represent those blank spaces, but then we also specify the parameters for the question or the details of how that information is collected, whether it's a prompt to the user or something done in the background. We've already talked about formatting the survey tab.
So the three most important column types in an ODK survey on the survey tab are type, name, and label. These are mandatory. Although you can add additional columns, you don't have to. We, however, at PMA suggest using additional columns to improve data quality and to help keep large surveys organized. So your first task within your Excel file on your survey tab is to go ahead and put the heading into the Excel sheet. So column A should say type, column B should say name, column C should say label, all in the first row. Please go ahead and pause your presentation to do this. So now that you have the column headings in your Excel file, we're going to talk about the first column, which is type. This column specifies the format of the question. By format of question, I mean the way that the question is presented. So a format could be an integer, a format could be a text question, another format could be a select one or a select multiple. There are actually quite a few types of questions within ODK. Our example here is an integer, which people often ask about age or number of children. And so because we want to help improve our data quality, we use the question type in ODK to make sure that our data is the type of data we want to receive. So I may be 23 years old, but if I specify an integer question, I have to enter the numeric values of 2 and 3 and cannot text respond, writing out the words 20 and 3. Another example of a question is a pick one. And when you have this type of question, you have a list name that is referenced in both the Choices tab and in the Survey tab. This list name links the question in the Survey tab to the answer options in the Choices tab. We'll get more into this detail shortly.
The second column is the name column. The value in the name column is extremely important, and there are several considerations when deciding on a name. The name can be any string of numbers, letters, and a few punctuation marks with no spaces. When authoring a form, it is important to adhere to your chosen style consistently from start to finish. PMA2020 does not name its variables using numbers. If question 20 is, how many chickens do you keep on the homestead, we do not give it a name of Q20. Instead, the name might be chickens_homestead. When words or abbreviations are used, the meaning of the data is more immediately understandable. Questionnaires can change, and moving up question 20 to be the new question 5 would necessitate renaming your names. The old Q20 would become Q5, old Q5 would become Q6, and so forth. Our preferred style is lowercase letters with words separated by underscores. Other styles might be lowercase with no punctuation or camel case. Because our end goal might be to analyze the data in Stata or in R, we do not want to have hyphens in the name, and for Stata we want to keep the overall name length to 32 characters or less. Finally, take note that no two rows can have the same name. The names that you choose in your XLS form will become the column names of the dataset that's received from the server. Here's an example where we see the names of an XLS form become the column headers for the dataset that's received from the server. The names start, end, today, device, ID, and interviewer become the headers in the dataset. And we see that there are two submissions for this dataset.
The third column we want to talk about with you is the label column. This is the column where the actual question is written. The previous two columns, type and name, are not seen by the interviewer. They're only in the background. The label column is what is shown on the tablet when the interviewer is conducting the interview. It is important that you write out the question completely, and please note that you can have spaces between the words and there's no upper limit on the number of words in a question.
It's also very useful to start with a questionnaire written out in Microsoft Word. That way we can more easily transfer the file to Excel format.
If you write the survey directly in Excel, it can be very hard to keep it organized. Rather, you should have a paper copy first.
The first types of questions that we'll talk about are start, end, today, and device ID. These are metadata, or data about the data. When we send people out to collect information using ODK, we might want to know things such as when the survey started and when it ended. And we also might want to know what is the IMEI number of the phone that's being used. To get this information, we add start, end, today, and device ID to the start of our ODK survey. Go ahead in your Excel file and put these 4 variables in column 1, rows 2 through 5, start, end, today, and device ID. We also need to give these variables a name, and for simplicity, we'll just use the same name as the type. This information is recorded in the background, and it is not presented to the user to fill in. Please pause the presentation and fill in the metadata for our survey. The most basic type of data entry in a questionnaire is a text entry. At the beginning of a survey, the most common thing that we might want to know is the name of the interviewer. In our demo survey, let's create a question that has type text with name interviewer and label interviewer name. In this case, we are going to collect the interviewer's name and not the respondent's name. This is what it should look like in your Excel file. Please pause the presentation and fill in the information. What you entered into your Excel file will look like this. We'll have a label, interviewer name, and a line for text entry. When ODK opens up this screen, the keyboard will automatically appear.
The next type of question we want to explain to you is Select 1. A Select 1 question has multiple answer options. However, you can only select one answer. In the type column, you will type Select 1, whereas the metadata question types that James explained to you had only one word. A Select 1 and actually a Select multiple will have 2 words in the type column. So the first word is either Select 1 or Select multiple, and then the second word will be the list name that offers the answer options related to that question. So, for example, if you open up the Microsoft Word survey about animal health that was provided with this presentation, you will see that we have multiple options for interviewer names. Those are our list name options. James, within this list of athletes, which one is your favorite?
I love Lionel Messi.
Oh, Serena Williams is my favorite. So these are our interviewers. So now I would like you to go into the row that you just made about interviewer name and change the type from text to select _1. After you type in select _1, make 1 space and write INTV, short for interviewer. Please pause the presentation and do that. This is what your row in Excel should look like. So now that we have a Select 1 question in our survey, you need to go ahead into the Choices tab and write out the options for the interviewer's name. So please toggle in your Excel sheet from the Survey tab to the Choices tab. As I previously mentioned, there are 3 main columns in the Choices tab. The first one is List Name, which is the link between the survey question and the answer options. So in our case, for the Select 1 question we just did, the list name is INTV, and you have 5 options, 4 names and other. I would like to note that one list of values can be used for multiple questions. That means that if your list name is yes_no_list, you can use that for multiple yes/no questions. That means that if I ask you in question number 3 if you've ever had a child, and the answers are yes or no, you can use it in that situation. If in question 50 ask if you have ever been to Kenya, You can use that same list name multiple times. That helps save time and make your work more efficient. The second column I want to tell you about is the name column. This is the value for the row in the survey. It is uploaded to the server with a submission, and it is downloaded with the aggregated results. There should not be a space in the name. The name that you choose for the value should help indicate what that answer value is about to make your understanding easier. You could make the name of the answer numeric if you wanted, or you could keep it alpha or a string type. It's up to you. There's pros and cons to either way. The thing that is important is to not make the name of the answer option too long. The final column I want to tell you about is the label column. This is the value that the interviewer sees on the ODK survey when they're using the tablet. So this can be the same value as the name or different, but please note the label can have spaces in between the words if you have multiple words.
In your demo survey, please add the choice options for interviewer name. This is what it should look like. In the column list name, we repeat INTV for each entry. In the label, we write the string that's presented to the interviewer. And in the name, we have something that we easily understand is related to the label, but there are no spaces. And here's what it looks like all together on an ODK Collect app. So we went from a text entry to a select one, and to refine this even further, we want to be able to first present a select one and then present a text entry for the name only if the select one was answered other. This is where relevance become important, or skip patterns. Relevant is a column that we add to the survey tab. In this column, you can write code to indicate whether or not the question in this row should be asked. If the conditions in the code are met or evaluates to true or 1, the question is asked. If not, if the conditions in the code evaluate to false or 0, the question is skipped. One way that relevance are used is that we might want to ask only women and not men about the number of live births they've had. In the row that has the live births question, the relevant column will refer to the question about gender and will evaluate to true only for women and false for men. As we fill out the form in ODK, values are stored for each row and are identified by the name of the row. In order to refer to the value saved for the row with name interviewer, we use special punctuation, the $, and curly braces. They surround the name. We need to use operators to test for true or false. The most common operators are $, to test for equality, $! For inequality, and you can see the others listed on the slide. Parentheses can be used to group logical statements together, and note that white space is ignored, so no need to worry about adding spaces or extra blank lines. We can join the operators together and create a logical statement. The most common ones are presented on this slide here. For the row with name second question, if we want it to depend on a previous answer to the row with name my question, we might want to use some of these relevant statements. The first one is $ curly braces with my question, $! Apostrophe apostrophe. The apostrophe represents an empty string. And this is saying the second question is presented on the phone if my question is not empty, or if it has an answer. We might want to make a relevant based on whether or not a previous option was selected. The second row in this table shows how we might do that with a select multiple question. If we want second question to be shown if other is selected, then we might use this syntax on the second row. A selected, left parenthesis, and the $ curly brace notation, comma, and then apostrophes surrounding the word other. Other is the name in the Choices tab. This syntax works for select one choices, but there's a simpler syntax for select one, and that's in the third row. We use the $ curly brace notation to reference my question, and then say equal and apostrophes with other. It is important to surround the words with apostrophes to indicate that they are values stored in the row.
James, this seems like some complicated coding, but it also seems like it can really help improve the quality of your survey.
Yeah, it does, and that's one of the great benefits of ODK. We can pre-program skip logic so that the REs out in the field don't have to memorize how to do it. So now let's go back to our demo survey, and we want to create the situation where we are presented with a select one first, and then if other is selected, have a text entry. So you can copy the 6th row where we have interviewer name and make a duplicate into the 7th row, then change the type in the 7th row to text, change the name so that it is unique. Here we've changed it to interviewer_typed, and then we add the relevant. Since interviewer is a select one question, we'll use the simple notation $curly brace interviewer equals apostrophe other apostrophe.
So James, if I understand, the code that is in cell 7D says that if in the question named interviewer, other is selected, the question named interviewer_typed will show up.
That's correct.
And in any other case, if other was not selected in the question interviewer, the question interviewer typed will not show up.
That's correct. You got it.
Great. So I want to go back to talking about types of questions. One type that is pretty simple is integer. This means that you can only input a whole number. As I said previously, PMA often asks questions about age, number of children, number of years ago since a certain behavior. So please pause this presentation and enter from the paper-based survey a row that in the type column says integer, in the name column says household number, and the label is household number.
So you see here, most questions only use type, name, and label.
Here's an example of what an integer question would look like on a tablet. As you can see, the keypad only provides numeric options for entry.
Another type of question that ODK can use is the geopoint. This is how we collect a single GPS coordinate. In our running example, on the next open row on the survey tab, write geopoint in the type column, GPS in the name column, and in the label column, GPS location of household. Some tips for collecting a GPS point is to turn on the phone's GPS and stand outside. The precision of the GPS is shown to you, so wait until you get your desired precision. Looking at the paper-based questionnaire, the next thing that we want to show the interviewer is a note. This is a screen that has no input, and it's just a message to the interviewer. Notes are useful for reminding interviewers of an action they should take, or to explain if something seems inconsistent. In our running example, in the next free row, in the column type, write note. In the name column, write start_note. And in the label column, we will now begin the survey.
So please go ahead and look at the survey and try to enter questions 44 and 45, learning what you have learned thus far. We now want to talk to you about a type of question called select multiple. This type of question functions in the same way as a select one, except that the interviewer can check multiple boxes related to answer options rather than just choosing one. Similar to a select_1 type of question, you will have your question type in the type column and a space and then the name of the list name of the related answers. So for our example, you'll see that the question about who vaccinated your livestock allows the interviewer to enter multiple responses for that question. Hence, we've decided to use a select multiple question. Please use the information in the survey and on the slide to put information in your Excel sheet about the type of question. Once you've finished putting the information in the survey tab, please click on the Choices tab, where we will now put in the list name related to the Who Vaccinated Your Livestock question. So in the Choices tab, in the first column, which is the list name column, you should type WHOVAC, HUVAC, which, as you can see, refers back to the Survey tab in the first column where you write the list name. So you see the list name is in two areas now, the Survey tab and the Choices tab. In the HUVAC column in the Choices tab, please, in the name column, write vet, and then in the label column, you can write out veterinarian/extension worker. In the next row down, you'll write the list name again, which is HUVAC, and the name of the next kind of person who could have vaccinated the livestock. I believe there are 4 options. Please pause the presentation and fill all 4 options in.
As a reminder, we want to keep the names short for the choice lists, and that's especially important with the multi-selects. In ODK, the choices that are selected get concatenated together, separated by a space. The next type that we want to talk about is date. This allows the user to choose a date. When a date screen first opens, the default date is set to the system date. In PMA2020, we always emphasize that our REs will make sure that their phone's system date is set correctly. In our running example, please add on the Survey tab, on the next free row, a date question with type date, name vax_date, and the label that you see on the slide. If you do that, the result is what you see here. In ODK, we can also have the type image, which tells the app that we want to attach a photo to the questionnaire. ODK will prompt you to take a photo using the phone's camera or to choose a photo from the phone's photo gallery. Now please pause the presentation and fill in the next free row on your Survey tab with the information on the slide you see here. This matches what is seen in the paper questionnaire.
So we are in the Survey tab, and we have mostly been talking about adding rows. And as James said, rows are analogous to questions. We want to get into a little bit more complexity, and the way you do that with an ODK survey is adding additional columns. One type of column that you can add is called the constraint column, so the heading would be constraint. What does this column do? It helps improve data quality by specifying a range of values that can be entered for the answer. So for example, when asking for a person's age, you want to avoid the resident enumerator enters an impossible answer like -22 or 200. So what you do is in the constraint column, you would write code or a formula specifying the limits on the answer an RE can enter. So in the example below, the answer for the person's age must be greater than or equal to 18. How do I know that? I see that in the constraint column, I have a dot, which means we are referring back to the question in that row, and we have the greater than and equal to sign. So please now pause the presentation, and for the variable household number, enter the code for the constraint that you see on the slide. Accompanying the constraint column is a column named constraint_message. And when there's a constraint that is not met, the enumerator cannot go forward in the survey. Therefore, it is helpful to have a message pop up that explains what the problem is so that the resident enumerator doesn't have to guess what the error is. Therefore, we suggest whenever you make a constraint, you include a constraint message. Please pause the presentation and enter the information listed in the second bullet. This is an example of a constraint message that popped up because the data that the enumerator entered into the tablet did not meet the requirements.
Another column that we can use often is the hint column. In the hint column, we can write text that will be inserted into the prompt, and it is displayed just underneath the label. The hint is italicized and written in a smaller font. We use a hint to instruct to the enumerator how to answer the question, and we add information in the hint that the enumerator does not need to read out loud. It is not part of the question. Please pause the presentation and add the hints that are found in the paper questionnaire into the respective questions in the XLS form.
Another column that PMA often uses is the required column. If you want to make it mandatory for the RE to answer a question, then you write yes in the required column. Otherwise, if the required column is blank, the interviewers can advance the survey without answering the question. James, what are the advantages of making a question required in a survey?
We do this so that the RE cannot simply swipe forward, advance to the survey without answering any questions. One way to indicate no response might be to leave the question blank and go forward. However, we want to force our interviewers to enter in some code that will indicate no response. And so we make all our questions required, but we have an option that would represent the blank or no response.
This is awesome. This really helps improve our data quality by knowing whether the answer was 0 or if the answer was just blank.
Yeah, it does. It's great. ODK is awesome. So we've gone through all the columns that we want to talk about and all the question types that we want to talk about in this webinar. Next, we're going to talk about how to convert the Excel file to an XML file that the phone and ODK Collect, the app, can understand. To do this, we use one of several means. The easiest thing to do is probably to download the free program xlsform offline. The URL is shown on the slide. It works for both Mac and Windows, and it does not require internet access after it's downloaded. A second way that we can convert our Excel form into XML is through the Open Data Kit homepage. They have a little web program that will convert the XLS form into XML. A third way that we can convert Excel to XML is to use the Python package pyxform. This is a screenshot of what xlsform offline looks like. When we do these conversions, oftentimes we might have made mistakes that the converter will recognize. The nice thing is that these converters will display messages that can give us a clue as to where the error is. One way that we might convert from Excel to XML is to do it iteratively. We'll write some code, convert it, see where an error is, go back and fix it, and start over. When the conversion finally happens successfully, we can put it on the phone.
When I was first learning ODK, the way that I found errors in my code was uploading it to the XLS website and having ODK point out the errors, just like you said, an iterative process to help me find out what code needed to be improved. Now that I'm better, I don't have to do that as much.
Finally, when the Excel file is converted to XML, we need to get it onto the phone. ODK Collect, when it is installed on a phone, will create a directory where it keeps all its forms. We can connect the phone to the computer and, using the file system, copy the XML file into the ODK directory for forms. Another way that we can get the XML form onto the phone is to upload the XML onto an instance of ODK Aggregate. This is the server that the ODK platform has built to accompany the ODK Collect app. In the app, then, we will specify the server that we uploaded to and use getBlankForm to download the form from the server.
Wow, James, we've covered a lot of territory.
What a journey.
In review, we have taken a paper questionnaire and translated it into an electronic ODK format. We've done this by implementing form logic such as relevant and constraint statements. Finally, we hope you all will take the time to convert your survey to XML to confirm that it is properly coded, and when it is, add the survey to a phone.
Here are some resources for further learning. We have links to the Open Data Kit homepage, an explanation of the syntax of XLS form, explanations of the relevant and calculation statements, and a link to the mailing list for the Open Data Kit community.
I find the xlsform.org website to be particularly helpful when trying to learn new code. Thank you for your attention during this webinar. We ask that you please send us your completed XLS form when it's finished. We actually have a small prize for the staff member that sends us their survey in XLS format first that you will receive when you're in Baltimore for the boot camp in August.
Ooh, what could it be?
Maybe something from the great state of Iowa. We're looking forward to seeing you soon.
See you in August.